my name is Lena and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to do 2 Christmas crafts that use embroidery and sewing. I am by no means an embroidery expert, so I would say that they are intermediate to beginner-friendly projects. I spent the last couple of days on the first craft, which is this embroidered pillow cover over here. The next project is making a handmade advent calendar. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope you try out 1 or 2 of these crafts. Happy holidays! I began by using a water erasable pen to draw out my general design on a 16 by 16 inch piece of fabric. I decided to draw out 3 trees in a forest. I originally planned to decorate the one in the very front with beads to make it look like it had garlands and a star and ornaments, but I decided against that in the end. Anyways, I'm just drawing out my branches and trunks of the trees. Then I got out my embroidery hoop and added it to the fabric. This will pull it tight so it's easier to embroider. The next step is to prepare the embroidery floss. I always divide it in half. It's usually 6 strands, and I divide it so that I'm working with just 3 strands. Then I threaded my needle and tied a knot.
What a bliss, a green red delight with glimmering silver wine.
I started by using pretty big stitches for the trunk and then smaller stitches for all of the branches. None of these really have to be perfect because there will be pine needles all around them, and I think imperfect actually looks a little better than not.
Christmas Day.
I repeated all of these steps for all 3 trees, and the total project time was about 2 days. With all of the branches done, it was time to move on to the pine needles. I used a gorgeous dark green color to make all of the pine needles, and I went on both sides of each branch except for the top branches. I just swept all of those stitches down so that it looked like a real tree.
There's joy in the air, families near.
At this point, I was quite happy with how it looked, but I did want to fill in the trunks a little more with some brown thread. I just did the same big stitches, backtracking halfway along each stitch and then moving on. I decided to use some white thread to place French knots all around the trees. This looks like falling snow, and I'm so happy with it. I definitely think that the pillow needed a little something, and since I wasn't decorating the front tree, I think that this was a good idea. If you don't know how to make a French knot, I highly suggest just Googling it. There are so many helpful tutorials, and they're quite easy once you get the hang of them.
Christmas Day, take me away.
To finish everything off nicely, I just added a few French dots around the trees to make more of a cohesive scene. To turn this into a pillow cover, I followed a pattern and YouTube tutorial by Rosary Apparel. I've used it many times and I'll link it below. Here I am just adding the zipper to the 2 back pieces so that the pillow cover is removable. So satisfying. The next step was to add the front and back together, so I just pinned them and sewed all the way around. Somehow I made the back about 1.5 inches too long, so I just cut that off in the end, but it was no big deal. I also cut the corners so that when I turned it right side out, they were nice and sharp. Lastly, I put in the pillow insert and zipped it up. The first step of making the homemade advent calendar was cutting out all of my pieces. I made 25 3x4-inch rectangles. Then I cut out a large rectangle that was 16.5 by 22.5 inches, and this will act as the base. The next step was to turn all of these little rectangles into pockets. I started by serging all 4 sides of each rectangle. This part is not necessary, but it acts as a very nice guideline for all of your hemming, and if you have a serger, I highly suggest using it. For the next step, I folded the serged edge over on both of the long ends of each rectangle and hemmed. I also hemmed the bottom edge of every rectangle. They should look like this from the back and this from the front. Next, I folded down the top edge by 1 centimeter and hemmed with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This gives that nice little pocket look. I hemmed the 2 sides and the bottom of the large piece as well, folding it in by 1 centimeter. For the top, I wanted it to hang on a wooden dowel, so I measured that and found that if it was folded over at 2.5 inches, the dowel would fit perfectly. I marked that with a water-soluble pen, and then I pinned everything in place and sewed right along that edge. The dowels that I had were only 12 inches long, but I needed 17 inches, so I sawed 5 inches off of a second dowel to add to the first. I sanded down that edge, and then I used some wood glue to connect the two. I thankfully had all of these tools on hand, but you could also always just buy a dowel that's the right size. After I glued it and wiped off the excess, I also added some tape. It's not holding up that much weight, so I figured this would work. I placed down my pockets to see how much room I had left because I wanted to do a design up top. I marked with a water-soluble pen how much room I had to work with, and I free-handed the words "Merry Christmas." I used a split stitch to do all of the lettering, and I really like how it looked because it gives a nice braided effect. Once I finished this, I thought it needed a little something else, so I decided to draw and then embroider some cute little branches on either side of the Merry Christmas. I did not mirror the two perfectly, but I did make sure they were roughly the same size and shape as each other and placed in roughly the same spot on either side of the wording. I used the same split stitch to do brown along all of my blue lines. These are the branches, and then I added green pine needles all around. I used the same split stitch to number all of the pockets 1 through 25 in the same green thread that I used for the branches. I evenly placed my pockets onto the base piece of fabric. If you try this yourself, you definitely can measure it out perfectly, but I do like how this looks handmade and imperfect, so I just eyeballed it. I used some fabric glue to attach the pockets. I originally wanted to sew them, but I did not know how I would make them look even if I sewed them on. So if you try this yourself and you want that extra security, I would glue them first and then sew along the necessary edges. To finish off the advent calendar, I just tied some thin yarn 3 times around each end of the dowel. With a darning needle, I threaded the yarn underneath the knots and then cut it off. This keeps it a little bit more secure. I wanted to carry some red down to the bottom of the advent calendar, so I just stitched on this gorgeous Christmas red pom-pom trim. To mark the days, I'm going to be using this cute little green velvet bow. I just tied it onto a little stick and I think it turned out so cute. You can get really creative with what you use to mark the days, and I also think it would be such a good idea to put a little chocolate into each pocket. I'm still not sure where I want to put my pillow, but I do like it on my couch, and I also might put it on one of my cream-colored dining chairs in the dining room. I think that it matches very, very well, and I'm getting so excited to decorate for Christmas in the next couple of days. Now I would like to share with you my latest knitting project. It was a work in progress for so long, and I finally picked it back up this November and finished the sleeves. I wove in all the ends and then I got to blocking my sweater. The blocking process will make my sweater look like it just came off of a store shelf. I soaked it for 20 minutes in cold water, and then I wrung out as much water as I could without stressing the fabric too much. I then placed the damp sweater on a blocking mat and pinned everything in place so that it would dry nice and flat. While the sweater dried, I got started on making my first ever apple pie. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and unfortunately both of my boyfriend and I came down with some pretty bad colds, so we had to cancel all of our plans with family. That meant all of the cooking was up to me, so I decided to get a head start and make the pie a day early. After I chilled the dough, I rolled it out and I tried doing that classic woven crisscross pie top, and I really liked it. It's not as hard as it looks. This baking project got me so excited for all of the other things I want to cook later in this month. I want to make gingerbread men, and I also want to try making homemade eggnog. Thank you so much for watching this video. I had so much fun making these holiday crafts, and I hope you try one or two of them out yourself. Happy holidays!